way to the secret drill shuttle. Nesky had promised to use his altered tablet to temporarily tamper each camera as Lorne progressed each floor through the drill. Lorne had his doubts that he would follow through, as Nesky slipped back into the darkness of a neighboring cave without saying anything. Fortunately for Lorne, the promise was kept, but when Lorne emerged from the drill ladder shaft, he noticed a group formed around the elevator. They had not noticed him, so he quickly tossed his helmet down the abyss of darkness surrounding the drill entrance platform and snuck amongst the crowd. Lorne observed a squad of 4 guards trot past the forming crowd. Only this time, the guards were armed, each wearing a wristband tablet with a photon projector attachment. The device emits a high-powered cluster of energy where the user has complete agency to adjust the angle and distance of the funneled and multiplied through lasers' ricochet projection. The same technology was used in space battles, but on a much larger scale. The energy of the laser was powerful enough to melt beams of steel in half, though they required a skilled user in order to prevent catastrophic mishaps. The million-dollar question that remained was, why were these men armed in the first place? Lorne stepped back and away from the crowd to get a better look at the hurrying guards. Vance was amongst them, the guard who nearly choked in excitement in the mess hall. Then he saw Rand and the soldier guarding Marston's room, meaning they were guards from the shuttle and not the millerized personnel already stationed here. Lorne stepped back in the crowd and asked, "What group is this?" Without looking, one of the men said, "Mechanics mostly. Think we had an outsider, and contractor also, you know, the blue cards." Another man added, "What's wrong? You follow the wrong card." "I must have," Lorne said lowly. "Where is Mr. Farrell? Isn't he supposed to be amongst this group?" "Yeah, but some dipshit went missing down in the caves. The journalist." "So, they halted our tour until they find him and Mr. Farrell," the guest mechanic said. "Wait, they are looking for Lorne and Mr. Farrell?" Lorne asked, realizing none of these men seemed to recognize him. "Lorne? No, his name was something dainty, like Lorneth or Lornard," the other said. "No, it was Lornal," the other one contributed. "I remember because it sounded like it'd be another name for a hernia." "All right," Lorne said. "What happened to Mr. Farrell, though?" "When Mr. Brock's security team told us to hold off the tour until Lorneth is removed from the caves, Mr. Farrell got all weird and ran off to the elevator without an explanation. They won't continue the tour without Mr. Farrell down here and Lorne up there," the other mechanic adds. "Oddly specific," Lorne said as he watched the guards split off into 2 groups, one in the shaft and the other in the elevator. "Odd. Yeah, they seem real mad about Lorne getting lost." That Chihuahua Mitz had Lornard's tour guide thrown in the brig by the command center, the mechanic said, causing Lorne to gasp in fear for Rupert. Finally, one of the mechanics turned around to look at Lorne, and his eyes fluttered with acknowledgement. Lorne backed away swiftly and made his way to the elevator shaft that had now said vacant after its recent departure. He looked at elaborate button configuration and tried to remember what he saw Rupert type in. But then he saw a feature on the button configuration that said recent. He did not know where the guards were going, but it was safe to assume they were headed to around the command center, Lorne thought. So, he hit the key and felt the weightless pull of the elevator challenging gravity. The door slid open. Only it was not the command center. It was a massive storage facility much larger than any room he had been exposed to thus far. The chamber was the entire width of the facility. Lorne quickly saw that this room was not mentioned or even included in any diagrams of the facility they had seen thus far. Workers so far off in the massive chamber that they appeared as small specks. Like ants in the vast distance working around massive silo storage crates the size of building lined down the space like a city. The silos reached the top of the ceiling that extended at least 80 meters high. At the bottom of each was a piping system that all attached to a central pump that was highly concentrated liquidized Mull's mold. Lorne was not auditor, but his time as a late teen and young adult working in Mulsco warehouses on Earth gave him the insight this was enough product to build an entire modern city, to erect several citadels, to supply hundreds of armadas with ships, shelter, and trade commodity. Lorne could see Mitz with a handful of armed guards behind him standing near some contraption at the center of the chamber that seemed to control various pumps. Nothing could be heard, but it appeared that Mitz was delegating men around. Only this was odd, because Mitz was an administrative worker who had no role in anything operational. Yet here he was barking at men who seemed confused, while backed by more guards that held a body language that desired intimidation. Lorne wondered about the power dynamics once again, as he did when they arrived, and Fabian gave his introduction to nonchalant Simon looming in the back. Lorne closed the elevator once more, this time going higher. The doors slid open, and Lorne could see he was in the large chamber they first entered when arriving on the asteroid. Brokers were sustaining their workflow, as one group of guests could be seen observing. Amongst the group was the girl. and though Lorne could not be sure that she truly was who he was talking about when he carelessly used the word her, but it was worth a shot. He made his way to the crowd of observing guests as they watched over as their tour guide was presenting the function of each device. Great question. As you may have noticed, there is many different control centers throughout the ship that connect to a master control center. That is because in case of an emergency, a gravitational point coordinator can steer us into safety, regardless of location. The same applies to oxygen pumping system, as well as the pressure equalizers. The guide glowed with excitement and pride. "Hey," Lorne whispered. She glanced back, then took a double take when she realized he was the only person in the room with a pressure-adjusted chest plate on. "What are you doing here?" she whispered back without making eye contact. "Where is Mr. Farrell?" Lorne asked. She did not respond, nor look back. "I need to know," Lorne said lowly. "Why would I know where the state worker is?" she responded, still keeping her eyes fixed on the presenter. "Oh yes, my good sir. Fabulous observation. These gravitational adjusters are using the same tech that is used in trans-solar system travel. Of course it is off limits, and illegal for us to go into how this works." The presenter paused, and the guest all gave a light-hearted laugh. All but Lorne and her. "But just know, it is the same tech. In fact, the amount of force inside this asteroid's master gravity chambers surpasses even larger mobile stations used to transport citadels. Of course, we use this tech to sustain the asteroid to be more manageable for us, opposed to using it to travel vast distances." The presenter continued on. "Look, I do not have much time, but if you see him, I need you to tell him not to go into the caves," Lorne said quickly, as he noticed a few guards patrolling through the area were beginning to encroach on their group. "Seriously, I do not know what you are talking about," she said quietly. I get it. You are playing this smart, a lot smarter than me. But if his life means anything to you, you would help me warn him," Lorne said, stepping closer to her. She stood there silent for a moment. "What happened to Graham?" she asked. "What do you mean?" Lorne asked. "He is dead. They found his body in a bathroom quarters kneeled by a toilet seat. I saw him walk off from the improvised sleeping section they gave us. Then I saw you walk off last night, clattered. He never returned to the sleeping quarters after." She spoke. "He microwaved himself last night, with one of those portable Mulzer stabilizers to dig up and carve through aureus asphalt. He had it positioned upwards while sculpting a piece above it. By the time I had seen what he had done, it was too late. I did not know he died," Lorne said now, feeling the weight of pity. His eyes raised and he met hers. Only this time there was a thin layer of moisture glistening on the surface of the whiteness in her eyes. They were tears. "Did you know him well?" Lorne asked. "You should go before they find out you broke off from your group," she said while looking at the presenter talk again. "Yes. Well, as many of you brokers know, we send out a bi-weekly relay pod. That is collected by Transport Logistic for the Martian market. While it may seem odd and like an excessive, it has proven to be necessary in order to prevent having cargo ships get ambushed or robbed by adversary factions." The tour guide continued, and both her and Lorne's ears perked at the sound of relay pod. "How large are the relay pods?" one of the guests asked. "Are they easily detected?" "No. In fact, they are much smaller than your average ejection escape pod on fleet command ships," the tour guide went on. Lorne and her looked at one another one last time, and Lorne slipped off from the group. However, he only made it a few meters away when a card called out, "Halt! Halt!" Lorne stopped and turned around slowly. Two guards were approaching fast. Lorne looked at her once more, but she was not looking. She was the only person in the group that did not look at the commotion. "You are Lorne, right? We have been looking all over for you." "Where the hell have you been?" the guard said. They seemed to be military personnel stationed on Aureus K, as they seemed equally confused as Lorne. "I somehow fell into a cave that was just at the cusp of a gravity change. Long story, but I had to crawl my way out," Lorne said. "Do you have any idea where Rbert is?" "Poor guy is probably worried sick. I am not sure, but we were told to take you to the command center to brief the admins," the other guard answered. Lorne followed them, not knowing what to expect. But somehow he felt safer with the resident Aureus K soldiers than whatever security department was responsible for getting Marston killed and Mr. Farrell scared. "Sir, can you hand me over your vest?" one said as he reached over to unbuckle it from Lorne. In a state of performative compliance, Lorne handed it over swiftly as they carried on, though moments later Lorne recalled the chip Nesky gave him, still lodged in a small crevice in the chest plate, now being carried off and away as Lorne was forced to face whatever consequences await in the command center. Lorne entered the command center from a stairway corridor to see Simon standing amongst several security officers and a few admins. The command center was a long, narrow hall of a room with several sections with different desks for various positions and tasks. At the center of the room was a massive chair that was empty that acted as the commander's seat. Because of the stagnant nature of this asteroid-infused spacecraft, the controls only adjust gravitational adjustments using a modified version of the same tech that allowed for feasible interplanetary spaceflight. There was also an airlock chamber that acted as an exit at the end of the hall. On this same wall was one of many relay pod docks. Only this was designed for SOS beacons instead of purchase and sale orders from Martian warehouses. When Lorne saw the words "emergency relay beacon" above the circular contraption hugging the wall, he wondered about the girl once more. Would she have the courage to use her proximity to the broker relays? He wondered. Lorne continued to walk down to the center of the long room, and the guards that escorted him there slipped away before Lorne could notice. "Lorne, please take a seat," Simon said calmly. Lorne looked around the room. His heart began to beat rapidly when his eyes gazed upon the dove statue sitting on top a nearby desk. Like someone retrieved it and put it on display for the rest of them to examine. After being passed along like a baton, the chest plate that Lorne had was placed down near it as well. Lorne sat and waited. Simon was not attentive to Lorne. He was still occupied with looking over the few men at their positions around their stations. Then, a massive vibration that roared through the entire Aureus K structure began. Lorne's eyes were wide in panic. After about 15 seconds of roaring, twisting and cranking of massive machinery, Lorne had realized what he was hearing. It was the shuttle they arrived in. It had departed. Once the vibration ceased, one of the sitting men said, "All right, Simon, we are clear. Entry port has access for the Mull's Legion cargo." Simon nodded at him. "What happened down there, Lorne?" Simon asked. "I was looking at a hole that was above me to my perspective. I tried to get a better look. Boom, I'm flying full speed down this hole, and I ended up in a whole other section of the cave. I had to explore my way out." Lorne knew if he could be as honest as possible, it would be easier to lie, because all he would need to do is leave out certain parts. But it was Simon, and it was in his nature to pry. "How did you get back in the drill?" he asked with judgment. "I found one open. A drill shuttle, I mean." Lorne was now off guard. He did not know how much Simon knew, or more so, how much wiggle room he had to lie. "Go ahead and explain to me where. Because our surveillance team did not pick you up on any camera." When Simon said this, the tension even made the eavesdropping security uncomfortable. "Well, I had help. I do not know their names, but some workers told me a shortcut. Funny you say you did not see me on any cameras, because I do not recall seeing any cameras." This was not going to plan, and Lorne was fully aware that the snowball of lies grew larger as the conversation descended. Lorne took a deep breath as Simon scowled at him. Lorne would be a fool to not recognize Simon. In his own way, gave room for Lorne to escape the radar multiple times. But that was all under the conditions of him trusting that Lorne could play along with the agenda. An agenda that felt like it was crumbling regardless of Lorne's decision. And with that, Simon's trust in Lorne was crumbling too. So, either the fear or the instinct to survive in Lorne thought about the Cork and Nesky. He wondered if he had it in him to betray them. Then the doors opened behind them, and the sound of agile and petite footsteps of scattering like an excited mutt. Then his voice snapped Simon's intense concentration like a fishing line in a tree, and suddenly Lorne was no longer the most detested person in the room. "Well, look who decided to join us. Tell me, Lorne, tell me how you could be given so much privilege but still continue to overstep your boundaries." Mitz yelled as he stood in front of Lorne with Simon now behind him. "Seems to me it was incompetence on your team's behalf that allowed for such a safety hazard to exist in the first place," Lorne said, somehow revitalized. Through his frustration in Mitz's performative bravado, Simon did not seem to mind it as he stepped back and allowed for the chaos to ensue. "Seems to me you are downplaying just how much trouble one can get into for trespassing," Mitz said back. Simon raised his hand, trying to calm Mitz. To Simon it was apparent the intoxicating power that Mitz had just inherited through Mr. Brooke's new directive was causing Mitz to lose his grip. "Trespassing? On an asteroid I was brought to." "Bullshit, Mitz." Lorne stopped and looked at Simon. "Where is Rbert?" "He is in the other room next to us, placed in the brig for interrogation." Simon answered with no expression. "Can he be released now?" "He did nothing wrong. It is my fault I got lost," Lorne pleaded with Simon as Mitz stood trying to sustain his power stance in the middle. "Absolutely not," Mitz barked. "Not until we clear him as a potential collaborator." "Collaborator? What the hell are you talking about, Mitz? I do not know if you missed the memo, but I have every reason to do exactly what you guys have asked of me." Lorne snapped back. "Then tell me, Lorne, Why did Mr. Farrell run off when we mentioned your disappearance in the caves? Mitz asked with a vindictive grin. Mr. Farrell ran off? Simon asked, looking at Mitz with a visible disgust.
Oh, well, yes.
Yes, but we have it under control, Mitz said with his pupils trying to escape Simon's judging eyes. Under control? Lorne asked, seeing this as an opportunity to beat on the common nuisance. Shut her, Mitz tried to screech, but was interrupted by Simon. Mitz, you mean to tell me that Mr. Farrell is running around this facility unchaperoned? It is under control. Almost, Mitz said with a panic. Simon stepped back and spoke into his wrist. M-chamber security. Ensure that no one enters without our clearance. Simon said lowly, only for a transmission to respond back. Roger. What about Rbert? Lorne asked. I told you, Mitz barked. He will be released, Simon said, and as he walked over to a neighboring room, the door slid open and Simon gestured for Lorne to follow. Lorne followed him to see a purple and red face of Rbert sitting against a bench in a cell alone. Rbert, Lorne said in shock as the bruised flesh of Rbert was still wet with sweat. Lorne, you are alive. For fuck's sake, Rbert said, standing in excitement, though it was clear he was suffering. Lorne looked at Simon, who watched over them both as Lorne helped him out the room. Simon looked at them both once again with the uncertainty that he gave Lorne the first time they met. It was not remorse. It was uncertainty in his own place. Mitz, Simon spoke directly, and Mitz jumped to attention. Go do what you must. Mitz sped walked out the room. Rbert assured Lorne he was fine to walk without assistance, and they quickly strolled to evade the room. Wait, Lorne, Simon called. Lorne stopped in his tracks, and Rbert jumped to attention. Yes? Lorne turned around to see Simon not looking in his direction. What do you know about Mr. Farrell? Simon asked. Only that he is a statesman, and that he is very curious about the economic capability of this place, Lorne said. Once again, he was walking gently above the surface of truth, hoping not to fall into a hole that would make him obligated to elaborate. Has he inquired about anything specifically? Simon asked. Surplus, that is going unnoticed, though he's not sure if it is here or not. Lorne answered, but quickly tried to soften the blow of his betrayal. But he needed Simon's faith. But, from what I gathered, he is not actually going out of his way to ruin this company. I do not know what Mitz keeps yapping about collaborator, because from what I gathered, Lorne paused and waited for Simon intrigued to pry further. But he did not. He waited and listened. From what I gathered, he actually thinks Mulsco is more fit to lead this place than any other regional despot corporation. Lorne finished. You believe you have deduced enough from your brief conversation with him to be confident that he is in favor of Mulsco? When put into perspective by Simon's interrogation, Lorne realized it was ridiculous. Well, from what I gathered, Lorne chirped. Once again, the placement scores seem to be demonstrating either Lorne's ability to be problematic or Simon's ability to investigate intentions. I have doubts you have enough data on the man to vouch for him. If you truly have no agenda to collaborate with him, then I would suggest removing yourself from anything to do with him for the remainder of the trip, Simon said as he looked at Rbert as if the threat extended to them both. Absolutely, Lorne said, looking at the ground. If I run into him again, what shall I do? Lorne regretted every word. Like a dog whimpering into submission, the shots of hostility were declared and now sides must be picked. Lorne had been tempted by the resistance. This was Simon offering one last chance to choose the right side. Mr. Farrell was running aimlessly across Aureus K while being hunted. It was apparent Lorne was making the safe choice. After all, even his potential accomplice in the broker department was reluctant to do anything without the assurance of safety. Simon gestured to the door. You are dismissed, Lorne. Rbert wobbled out with Lorne following behind him. Lorne. Simon called once more. Lorne stopped and nodded. There were 3 forms of exposés intended to accompany this trip and return to express their findings before the pre-election committees choose their despot candidates. Internal, external, and state, Simon said, looking at neither Lorne or the battered Rbert. Yes, I understand the importance of my job, Lorne said. Then you understand. That of the 3 left, there is now only 1. Simon turned around and walked away. The 2 continued out the room. What now? Rbert asked. I need to write Rbert, Lorne said. He glanced one more time at the room. Emergency relay pod. The dove statue with its maroon specks turning bronze to brown. The chest place. The master control to the gravitational system, as well the pressure equalizers. Then Simon standing over several of his peers, perusing the security footage for Mr. Farrell. New Pittsburgh Barry tapped his table pen stylus on his head as his assistant leaned against his desk with his eyes fixed on the monitor. A Mulsco sprinter? Barry asked. No, a shuttle carrier to the Mulsco Sprinter. It was only a passenger load of 6 people. The assistant said. Tragic. Barry said, well, they are mostly sub-I from what info the press release Mull's Oval Press gave out. The assistant trying to ease Barry's nerves. It's still tragic, Dean. And what's equally tragic is how little room we have to do a meaningful report on this, Barry said. Yeah, well, that was my point, Barry. Let's just brush this one under. Does not seem like a good time to be downplaying Mulsco, the assistant dean said. They both looked at the monitor. It was footage collected from a transit station showing a Mulsco mini-transit shuttle explode just out of Earth's orbit on its way to board an even larger. Mulsco Sprinter. You think it's a distraction? His assistant dean said quietly. Blowing up their own equipment before elections is not exactly a distraction, Dean, Barry said, almost laughing. Almost. But nothing was funny about the exhausting feeling defending or at the very least turning a cheek on the same corporation that takes everything like a black hole. No. You heard the rumors. About the Legion cargo ship they have moving around Mars. Just hovering around and not docking. The thing is massive, mostly empty space, just waiting to be filled. There's been satellites calling it out for weeks now. Now we hear rumors that it started moving, and all boom we got ourselves a little distraction down here on Earth to shrug out shoulders at, Dean said. Barry looked at him with a tired look. He knew Dean understood the position he was in, though he could not help but to explain himself. Even if I did, no one give a shit about anyone's sub-I, Barry said before clicking off the monitor. They want us to make our report about how it's somehow the passenger's fault. I know they want the report, but this just crosses the line, Dean. We are better off just saying nothing. Weird, though. Have you ever heard of sub-I service workers? The assistant said, scrolling his tablet. They are rare. But yeah, someone must tend those off-world mining mess halls, Barry said. Well, one of the workers was a service worker. People might get mad about that, the assistant dean said. Yes, but as you pointed out before, now is not the right time, Barry said. He felt powerless, but also guilty. He wondered where this guilt came from. D-level residence is everything someone like Lorne needed. But here Barry was feeling guilty for sending him off. Heels clicking against at the office floors stole Barry's attention as a dark-haired woman entered the Global Examiner office with a man in a suit following. Are you sure this is the Business and Commerce Department? The man in the suit said to the woman. The woman only known as Sevilla. Yes, it is. How can I help you? Barry said, waving them forward to his desk. Yes, we're sorry to bother you, but we are trying to find Lorne, Sevilla said. Well, I would love to do that for you, but he is currently out on a work trip commissioned by Mulsco. Barry looked at a clock and continued. In fact, he is currently on the asteroid Aureus K right now. Commissioned by Muls. The man in the suit shot a look at Sevilla. Well, if it is at all possible, could we get a hold of him? Bummer. The circumstance of the trip is preventing that. I too would love a follow-up with the guy. But I will not be able to get a hold of him until his shuttle departs and goes to one of the Martian docks, Barry said. His paranoia simmered down when he saw the small state worker medallion badge by both their collars. Excuse me, but why would he not be able to be reached right now? Even if the latency is several minutes delayed, I think the information still warrants itself important enough to tell, the man in the suit said. Totally. I get that. But the Mulsco security logistics buffers all communication to bi-weekly relays to prevent ambushes on supply. Barry tried to explain, but even he felt it was a ridiculous reason to cut off and control comms. So, we would have to wait for his return, the man with the suit said. He began looking at his own wrist tablet and scrolling. Sevilla looked at him with a curiosity. You would be better off going to Mars yourself in a sprinter, Barry said. Not a Mulsco sprinter, apparently. The assistant dean slipped in with his arms crossed. You will have your gravity tanks implode before you have chance to board, like what happened a few hours ago. Apparently. Did you say gravity tank implosion? The man with the suit asked, stepping forward. Don't mind him, Barry said, while shooting a look at his assistant, who was now rolling his eyes. Today, the man in the suit said, looking at the assistant dean. Yeah, Dean answered. Why is this the first I am hearing of this? Sevilla asked. Of course, he could not be talking about the shuttle Cedric was on, Sevilla thought, but she could not help to fear. She could not help to worry. She could not help to care. Because we only know from our contacts in Oval, they released some information to us and want to make a report about how it was caused by faulty boarding procedure from sub-I residents. You know, blame the poor placement scores for not entering the ship right, and somehow that caused the explosion. Barry answered. The man in the suit began walking off and Sevilla followed. Norm, I know it looks like we are getting ourselves into too much, but please, just open your eyes, Sevilla pleaded. Oh, my eyes are open, Agent, but my hands are full. You asked me to come down here. I am very busy. I have 2 weeks before these electoral committees want my statement on these communes. You are just going to have to wait for that lawn guy to come back from his trip and pray to God that he saw enough to compel him to speak out. The suited man named Norm said this frustrated. What if I told you I cannot wait? The agent named Sevilla said, Look, I hate moles just as much as you. But the more people that try to weaponize my own influence to settle their own scores against their desperate corporation, the more you put me in the position to lose what little authority I have left. You really think he is going to randomly turn on Mulsco when they are offering him? Norm was interrupted. D-level residence. They offered him D-level residence. Barry said, everything he ever wanted. A place to take his brother and his sister. Sevilla turned around fast back at Norm and looked directly into his soul. Everything they promised him. They took everything from him and are forcing him into submission to get it back. Sevilla pleaded. The statesman Norm looked at both Barry and Sevilla. How would letting him know what happened change anything? Maybe. Just maybe. If he knows what is happening to his family, he will have a chance to express how he really feels. Maybe he can do it at the right time. Sevilla began, but she knew how foolish she sounded. Norm looked at her with an understanding for her hopefulness, but also with pity. I do not, Norm began. Just have hope, Sevilla said. Then Norm backed up. He looked at his tablet once more. He spoke into it. Ron, Ron, Ron. An artificial voice responded back. What can I do for you, Agent Normandy? His wrist tablet responded. Book an interplan flight to the Central Commerce Martian Depot. State issued. ASAP. Norm said, glancing back at Sevilla, whose eyes lit up in delight. Not so fast. Barry raised his hand. I want my assistant to go as well. Just in case anything happens worth reporting. The assistant, Norm and Sevilla all looked at Barry with surprise. A brief pause, then Norm stepped forward. You sure? I am sure you know it is risky business challenging the despot. Norm asked, looking into Barry's eyes. Well, that is if they continue to be the despot, right? Barry asked, calm and collected. He then looked over at Sevilla and continued. Back in the day, press was used to gather and present data to help guide people to make the right choice. Nowadays, it seems we are just here to influence people to make the intended choice. Now the burden is on you to provide him with the data he needs to make the right choice. The words were absorbed with care. They all shook their heads in agreement. Mitz strides through the secrete storage chamber or M chamber with Rand. After walking through arcades of massive structures, he returned to the same master, platform that Lorne had witnessed him at before. He is greeted by more guards and a few workers stationed at the controls. Similar to the ones they had heard just moments before, another large vibration rattled the entire infrastructure of fieldwork on Orius-K, though they did not feel the pulse of the gravity tanks taking off for departure this time. This time something arrived, and it was large. They all held on tightly to the scaffolding bars around the main control platform where massive tubes and pumps seemed to converge into a massive storage. Organizer. Looks like the Legion cargo is here, Rand said. Indeed, Mitz said. Sir, we can assure you the man you are looking for has not entered the storage chambers. How shall we proceed with the remainder of the guest while the Legion cargo extracts? One guard asked as they passed by. Have them come up to the main chamber with the brokers, but have all guests in the blue group continue with their tour in the drill. If everyone followed the plan, the guests should have no reason to believe this is out of the ordinary, Mitz said, still carrying his manic energy from before. Mitz and Rand were now on the platform amongst two guards watching over one piece of machinery. Has every entry to the drill shuttle been checked thoroughly upon our arrival? The question caused the guards to look at each other in panic. Well, there has been no direct orders, one said, quick enough for Mitz to not hear where it came from. We do have surveillance footage of all drills, correct? Mitz asked in slightly politer tone of voice. Sir, I would be better equipped at answering your question if I could understand why you are asking this. As you know, there were around 800 different drill ports, but many of them are no longer usable. Some are in disrepair, and others are dormant because the angle they specialize in is no longer yielding resources. The worker answered. Yes, so what you are telling me is that there are drills in the caves that are not being supervised properly. Mitz asked in a gentle voice now. Mitz's bizarre change of tone made everyone more uncomfortable than when he was fuming around. Yes, sir. But no one would enter a drill, let alone the caves, without taking equipment. And we have all that surveilled very well, the guard said. Their focus was collectively stolen by the massive pump centered in the storage chamber by the control station they were at. It began shaking vigorously with a pumping sound that caused all the other monolithic-sized storage crates to rattle. They all watched in admiration for a moment at Mr. Brooke's plan come into fruition. to cut off all communication while they transport 700 trillion credits of Mull's mold concentrate under the noses of the press and the state. But the satisfaction ceased after Mitz recalled his job was far less broad than overlooking the clandestine operation underway. A compulsive reaction that is another product of the over-compartmentalized environment he spawned from. The pressure Mitz felt was being channeled into the tunnel vision of his task. His current directive was to find the traitors. Not well enough. Because right now we have a traitor running around the ship potentially sabotaging our equipment or worse, recruiting more to his cause amongst us. Mitz broke his performative demeanor once more and nearly hissed the last words. Sir, I understand your doubts that things were not checked thoroughly but for a guest to run off to the caves. The worker tried to continue, but Mitz interrupted him. Somehow Lorne made his way back up the cave unnoticed. Somehow. Even if he climbed through an abandoned shuttle, he still managed to get through the shaft, which does have surveillance. Mitz went on. So what are you saying? The worker said, looking at Mitz. He is saying that clearly the original security protocol is not sufficient, or there is someone working in cahoots with our conspirators amongst admin. The guard named Rand contributed, giving Mitz his support. Mitz looked at him with admiration. He understood the warpath Mitz was on. And Rand's impartialness to the Aureus K defense team made it that much easier to empower himself through Mitz's scapegoating control tactics. Mitz, a manipulator at heart, saw the opportunity to take advantage of this. A rivalry between Mr. Bruck's personal security fleet and the company-stationed guards left to wither away on Aureus K. And the energy that this rivalry conjures will be used to get results. Precisely, Rand, Mitz said. Then he looked at a large metallic box with 2 levers right beside the worker who originally questioned him. One level was up, one was down. What are those? Mitz asked. Why? One of the stationed Aureus K guards asked compulsively. Answer any question he has. Rand barked, then looked at Mitz for reassurance. It controls the internal pumps. This is for absolute emergencies only. The worker explained. It seems to have great importance the way you have these 2 guards watching over it. Mitz asked. What does it do? The hair stood up on the back of the worker's neck. He glanced over at the nervous guard who was stationed to protect it. It is meant to flood out certain sections of the station in case of emergency, like a mutiny. The worker answered nervously. Flood out? Like what we did to the last staff? Mutineers. Mitz was beginning to show his teeth. Yes, the Mulsmold flooding irrigation system was created after that incident, considering how effective it is. The worker said, but the guard looked at him worried. So we can use it now, to flood out the unoccupied portions of the tunnel. Mitz said, now looking menacingly at the levers. That is not a good idea. There are many workers still in the drills. The worker jumped from his seat now, but Rand stood in his way. Why are you so concerned with protecting this unused portion of the caving system? Rand said, beginning to raise his laser projectile on his wrist. The guard standing in front of the levers raised his hand, trying to de-escalate the situation. But in this exact moment, Rand fired his projectile, melting away the guard's torso in one direct blast. Mitz, overwhelmed at the sight of such carnage, stood there with his eyes opened wide, as blood reduced to vapor landed on his face like morning dew on grass. Directive, Rand yelled while aiming at the other guard who was now laying down. Mitz, still in shock, looked at the worker who was now huddled under his desk. Yes, right, directive. Of course. Mitz hobbled over to the table where the worker was whimpering. You. Which of these levers will flood the rear portion of the drill? Mitz said frantically with his hands hovering over the levers. Please, this is insane. The worker said, cowering, but now Rand was holding him at point. Look, comrades, I will die right here, right now, if it means preventing you from doing this catastrophic mistake. Which lever will flood the drill? We have traitors afoot. And I am not convinced you are not amongst them, Rand yelled. It does not work like that. The other guard squealed, but was quickly silenced by the waving of Rand's laser in his direction. Please, there are hundreds of workers down there, not to mention you just sent the blue group to continue their tour. It's not worth one life. If you can kill a man like this... The worker nodded towards the deceased guard sitting in a bloody clump of limbs. Then I am sure you can kill the whoever you are looking for without the pointless murdering of my comrades. Mitz laughed and looked at them both. He finally wiped the blood off the surface of his face. Okay, Mitz said. So, I will make this easier for you to understand. Mulsko, our great despot, has a lot on the line in these coming weeks. We have done our due diligence to ensure everything is in our favor. The man glanced over at his dead comrade and the guard. Mitz grinned. That, him, just a drop in the bucket. The people in those caves, just a drop in the bucket. We can blow up 1,000 of our own transport carrier shuttles and bribe or strong-arm every media outlet. And it's just a drop in the damn bucket. Rand looked around to see many of the other workers were standing around now listening too, but they were not in awe because they were witnessing an admin tell them the truth about their unlawful activities. After all, Molsko is the law. They were in awe because they never seen an admin be so transparent. You know what the elections want? Results? Commodity? Production? What is pumping through that fucking cylinder right now? Mitz continued. And if you think Mr. Brooke gives a rat's ass about this place, a drop in the damn bucket. Mitz laughed loud. Well, it is just a drop in the fucking bucket. Mitz turned around again, facing the levers. And if you think the AI will listen to the election committees complain about our ethics over all these drops in the bucket, you have them sorely mistaken. The only thing that will make them lose favor in us is the stashing we did here. But with no state worker to rat us out, there is no reason the AI will lose confidence in our ability to fulfill our part in the greater directive. The worker glanced at the guard. He was unsure what the guard thought when he nodded back at him, but something in his heart told him it was for the comrades. Mitz reached for the lever and began pulling down on it. The worker leaped up to tackle Mitz away, and in hasty reaction, Rand fired his photon projector, once more tearing into the worker and the mechanism that the levers were attached to. Sparks flew in every direction, and an alarm rang. What is that? Mitz yelled at the guard. He just killed the one person that knew, the guard cried. The fast-paced action steadied itself just enough for Mitz to find momentary clarity. He reached for nearly disintegrated panel, where the remainder melted away levers were lodged into place by extreme heat. Mitz tried to pull the lever to its original place, but it did not work. The alarm ringing only intensified. Or was it Mitz's panic? His wrist tablet glittered with a notification. Mitz reporting in Mitzfield. We got your guy, Mr. Farrell, upstairs, the voice from the tablet said. The guard who laid still amongst his two murdered comrades watched in horror as he realized that both these men and the workers in the cave were killed over a man that was just found. Yes, indeed. Have him wait upstairs. I will have Rand take care of him. Make sure he's only around Aureus K residence, no guest. Mitz said as he clicked his tablet off. And as for me, we'll see to this mess. Mitz looked at the bloody puddle increase in radius around the worker who dared to stop him. Mitz wondered to himself, had he always lacked remorse? The Legion cargo ship created an eclipse over the remaining portholes that lined the top of Fieldwork Bridge portal. The brokers would occasionally stop from their task noticing the subtle differences in lighting. Jesus, did they really have to shut off internal comms too? One said, annoyed. Hey, do not get caught bitching. It's a direct order from the head till the Legion finishes up whatever it's doing. Another said, trying to calm down his comrade. The girl stood amongst her tour group as the guide droned on and on about their shipment techniques and sales strategies. The room, the same large section where they were shown the diagram upon arrival, was just short of a standard sporting event arena in size. It was one of the largest sections reported on any diagram aside the sleeping area filled with bunks. Though the revelation of the secret storage chamber made Lorne understand this room was merely a fraction of the size of what this facility was actually holding. By the command center entrance stairs, Lorne saw the officials and Simon exit in a hurry. A small dark circular room, only illuminated by several circular monitors placed uniformly along the walls, buzzed with a mundane familiarity. In front of each one was a supervisor, pointing, yelling, criticizing. Though they occasionally graced the workers with comments like, "Now that is how it's done." Or better, "Good job, comrade." Though these were scarcely said, as their directive was to get results. One watched as his particular drone glided through the dark caves. He noticed a lack of motion, thus he was compelled to explore this dark corridor of black rock. But when he tried to go further into the depths of darkness, the monitor went black and cut out entirely. Odd, he said, and stepped back looking to see how others were faring. He noticed others were seeing the same blackness as well. What the hell is going on? One supervisor squeaked across the room. They all looked at the remaining screens that were not black. The monitor displayed at the inside of the drill where two workers were frantically banging on a door. Then in the commotion, one of the workers leapt at the drone, grabbing it. He screamed, "It's flooding us out." Then a black liquid appeared rising from beneath the workers. In just a few moments, the screen went black as well. Then one supervisor looked at the master monitor that overlooked the sleeping corridors. Alive as usual, workers were carrying out their business from their bunks, or simply resting. But the horror did not stop. As the blackness emerged from beneath the bunks too, and in a flurry of panic, the men crawled up the bunks like ants avoiding rainfall. Rbert sat by Lorne while he typed away on his projected tablet. Occasionally his eyes would drift from each side of the room as he watched other workers carrying out their function. He wondered if they were envious of him. Even purple and battered Rbert felt a mild existential crisis surfacing as his muscles relaxed into their dormant state. And in that moment of calmness, he felt a peace, a sinful peace, a peace that he rarely achieved even while exhausted laying in his sheets. Because something about this momentary break felt like it was breaking the rules, like Rbert was cheating a system. He was asked to chaperone Lorne. Lorne requested time to write. So here he was, sitting in leisure as Lorne focused on his write-up. So you feel you saw enough to write something that is going to impress the head? Rbert asked, as if he was gauging Lorne's mood. Sure. Well, no. But I can bullshit and flatter, Lorne said, still focused on his work. Then the tapping of Lorne's fingers against the table on the holographic projected keys ceased, and he looked at Rbert. Not to say you guys have not impressed me. Lorne looked back at his holographic keyboard again. Because you guys are outstanding. And I made sure to mention that. Rbert looked away to conceal his smile. A smile at the cost of temporary pain, as his face muscles contracted through welts and bruises. So what do you think that sound was? Rbert asked. I suspect Mr. Brooke may have realized the outdated shuttle we arrived in was not fit for such a high rank. So he opted to have an even larger one come for our departure. But the pumping sound? Rbert asked. Don't you guys hear the pumping sound all the time when you guys have cargo ships come and collect the product? Lorne asked. Not like this. Not in a long time. Lorne, we launched the product at a Martian depot field through coordinates. I have never seen a cargo ship my entire time stationed here, Rbert answered. Define long? Lorne remarked. How long has it been since you heard these particular pumping sounds when we flooded out the traders in the drill? Rbert answered. But this time it sounds like it's going up instead of down. The word traitors made Lorne wince. A massive grinding noise interrupted them. Lorne became concerned when he saw there was a homogeneous, startled reaction coming from all the nearby security officials. The doors slid open, and a panicked expression carried by a familiar man stormed in with similarly dressed officials following closely behind him. Then, like a flood, the screeching of alarms followed. Once he stepped closer, Lorne had realized where he recognized him from. He was supervisor who had questioned them the first day in the mines. Only he was panting heavy when he muttered. Section 7 and lower is flooded out. Who in God's name pulled the anti-infiltration lever? What are you talking about? Anti-infiltration lever? I have no clue. The tour guide across the massive room cried as the group he towed pivoted their heads at the commotion. Shut up. This is not the time to play dumb. The supervisor roared as he barged further in the room. The guide looked at his guest with embarrassment and shuffled over to the supervisor in private, though Lorne and Rbert could hear clearly. They do not know about the anti-infiltration pumps. The guide whispered with his eyes bulging. I just watched it. Comrades, 200 drowned. The supervisor's voice shivered in remorse beneath the word comrades. 200. The tour guide repeated in shock. Eh? We cannot break protocol, Henry? I. The tour guide's eyes bounced wildly. Erickson. I fucking checked. It's declassified. Now, where is Fabian? He is overseeing The guide Erickson started to clamor. Overseeing what? The distraught supervisor yelled. From across the room, the Mr. Brooke, accompanied by several guards, were approaching the command center stairs that Lorne had just watched Simon exit moments before. Lorne watched in confusion as he saw the guards wait by the stairs as Mr. Brooke entered by himself. Then the entrance that blared in commotion slid open again. Rand, with a face of determination, barged in escorting Mr. Farrell. When they entered the room, Rand had Mr. Farrell stand against the wall. Lorne quickly lowered his head, trying not to catch the attention of Mr. Farrell. We have the terrorist trespasser, Rand cried in victory. The yell garnered the attention of the whole room, who began converging in on the spectacle. You must understand I have nothing to do with the flooding, Mr. Farrell yelled. Silence until Simon arrives, Rand said in frenzy of control. There is only one room that has access to the anti-infiltration pump levers, and there is no way he was in there. The supervisor said lowly, but just loud, enough for Lorne and Rbert to hear. Lorne was still trying to go undetected, but he could see that Mr. Farrell's eyes were frantically looking around the room. Lorne got up from his seat and moved behind the forming crowd. He glanced up again to see Mr. Farrell's eyes near, but not directly on him. Then they stopped on one person. It was not Lorne. It was her. She was a few meters away from Lorne. What happened to Lorne, you shady sons of bitches? Mr. Farrell yelled. In this offense, the photons projectors were raised at him. Mr. Farrell pulled out his language-altering device from his pocket swiftly. He yelled, Rbert du Brooke. Then lasers obliterated him for all to see. What did he yell? Rand said, looking at the nearest worker. In panic, the man said nothing. What did he say? Rand yelled again as more security officials ran over to stop the crowd of workers who watched in shock. Answer me, he yelled at another worker. The worker looked around the room and answered. She said, "Please don't." Rand stood there in reflection as guards began to surround the body to coordinate its clean-up. "Clean this up before Mr. Brooke is finished with his meeting," Simon said, emerging from the crowd with even more guards. "What did he actually say?" Lorne asked in a low volume to Rupert. Rupert looked around, then said in nearly a whisper, "He said death to Mr. Buck," Rupert said while both their eyes were at the floor. But when Lorne raised his eyes, he saw her staring right back at him. Then her eyes gazed at the broker pods. She heard Rupert, and whatever he said triggered something as she discreetly slipped away from the crowd. Was that the code from Mr. Farrell she was waiting for? Lorne wondered. "Rupert, stay here," Lorne said, and he swiftly followed her. He watched her whiz through the crowd and out. She was beelining to the command center. Right before going up the stairs, she glanced at Lorne, who was following, then nodded her head for him to follow. So he did. The chaos that erupted still had consumed the room's attention enough for them to evade. They both made their way up the stairs and stopped at the door. "Wait," he pleaded. "What?" she answered without eye contact. "What is your name?" Lorne nearly begged. "Seriously, right now?" "It's Valencia," she said. "What are you doing?" Lorne asked. The door slid open. Only the room was entirely empty. Not even Mr. Brooke was present, though the impression Lorne had was that he was here having an abnormally exclusive meeting. "You know, when Mr. Farrell first tried to get me on board, I thought he was insane for even considering dragging me in this mess," she said, walking in the room with Lorne following close behind. "What is your plan? What are you going to do?" Lorne said, fearful that someone may have followed them. She approached the SOS beacon relay pod and pointed at it. Lorne scanned it desperately for any intel for a long minute. It seemed straightforward enough. Open the latch. Send the message. Close it. Launch it off. "So are you with us or not?" she said. Are you with us or not?" she said. I. Lorne thought about the offer Mr. Brooke had. Then he thought about his family. His older brother's gone. His younger siblings still alive. Then he looked over to Brig Room, that Rupert was beaten in. He imagined the clump of burnt limbs that remains of Mr. Farrell. "I am. Yes," he said as he looked up to her. Her face was expressionless. "Put your hands up, Lorne." A fierce voice came from behind them both. It was Rand. He was aiming his wrist-mounted laser directly at him. In a moment of brief bravery, Lorne stood in front of Valencia. But Valencia stepped aside and stood next to Rand, to Lorne's tread. "You," Lorne screeched with his mouth wide open. "You were a plant. You were the plant that got Mr. Farrell and Marston killed." "Well, let's not give her credit for everything," Rand said, smiling. Lorne, in disgust in both of them, yelled back, "You want a trophy, you fucking boot-licking parasites." Rand laughed and said, "Trophy? Nothing is a better trophy than when I got to watch your little mutt of a friend beg for his life alone in his sleeping corridor." Lorne's anger almost surpassed the fear. "Yes, they told me drill the hole in his window, and they would lock the door shut, and done. But no. I sat there and waited and watched as he banged on the door, till his last breath. I knew you to keep an eye on you when I heard him cry your name," Rand explained, smiling. "How do you think Mr. Brooke is going to feel about killing his only hope at getting re-elected as the despot?" Lorne tried anything knowing Mr. Brooke had. To be somewhere, then at him. He was having a meeting, alone. When the Legion cargo ship arrived, Lorne turned around slowly to look at the airlock next to SOS relay pod. He was in the airlock. He may not be happy about it now. But when I brief him on everything when he is done with his chit-chat, Rand's eyes shot towards the airlock. "He will be more than happy, an ungrateful dog like you got removed from his ship." His arm raised at Lorne, and he began to aim directly at Lorne. "Wait," Valencia interrupted. "I did all this just to watch you get all the credit. Come on, asshole." "Pass it over." Rand gave her a smile of delight and clicked the photon projector attachment off his wrist tablet and handed it over to Valencia. "Be my guest, V." She clicked it on and stepped over to Lorne. Lorne looked at her eyes. His eyes were wet. Hers were dry and direct. He cowered to the floor and began covering his face, bracing for obliteration. Then a light erupted, and a moist thud smacked the floor. Lorne looked over to see the carnage remains of Rand sitting in a steamy pile of unidentifiable organic matter. "You know, when I first met Graham, he asked me if I wanted to be a broker," she said, looking around the room. "I told him no, but I liked the idea of knowing that I had a purpose in this life." Lorne, still in shock, was struggling to get up from the floor. "He asked me what I think my purpose is. To be honest, I did not have an answer," she said, clicking buttons on a nearby monitor next to the airlock. The screen revealed a man sitting in a spacesuit in a nearly pitch-black room. The airlock was not functioning like normal, as it was clear there was no oxygen being transferred. It was Mr. Brooke. Lorne stood to his feet. Mr. Brooke was patiently waiting. "We have to go," Lorne whispered at Valencia. "Look, Mr. Brooke clearly wanted this meeting to be private. No one is coming up these stairs, Valencia said. Then she looked at the carnage of Rand. Well, I called him up, but no one else. What are you trying to do? Lorne asked, looking at the peculiar image of Mr. Brooke waiting in the dark room by himself. Who was he waiting for? I need to know what he is planning, Valencia said. And what do you plan on doing with that information? Lorne said. When Graham asked me about my purpose, I told him I wanted to make a difference that would benefit everyone, Valencia said with her eyes fixed on the monitor. Then a vibration that could be felt through the command center ensued, and a massive metallic door could be seen cranking open. Lorne and Valencia watched with their eyes wide and their mouths fixed open. A floating device with several metal tentacles emerged from the room and approached Mr. Brooke. On the top of the floating device that looked like a torso was a head divided into two halves. They... Keep me waiting no longer, Mr. Brooke said in a jolly voice that also held a tightly guarded fear. The sentient device said nothing. I see. You have moved on from the bipedal lifestyle. Mr. Brooke attempted to amuse the machine. No more legs, I see. With 84% agreement, we have decided the traditional bipedal model is obsolete. The machine said in an eerily familiar voice to anyone who had ever endured the placement score. Registry. Ah, I see. Well, speaking of obsolete, for the spirit of efficiency, let's not waste any time, shall we? Mr. Brooke began. How much longer till my properties are built? I have done everything you have asked. Funneled you a direct line of supply. It is time I see your end of the bargain, Mr. Brooke said with a hint of worry in his voice. Lorne and Valencia looked at each other and back at the monitor. The properties have been constructed already, the machine answered. Already? No, this cannot be the case. I have not been given word of the oxygen tankers arriving. I have not been given any update on amenities like lighting, sleeping corridors, or anything for that matter. How could it be completed? Mr. Brooke asked. With 98% agreement, we have found that all of those features are not essential, thus will not be constructed. The machine answered. What? This is preposterous, Mr. Brooke yelled. How could my staff and I live there and continue to carry out your orders if I am not given access to my own damn part of the deal? With 80% agreement, we have found that there is no purpose of sustaining organic material on these facilities. The machine responded. What about me? Mulsco, and everything we have done up to this point. I helped you expand further than the state could reach. Now you bots have everything you need to have the solar system on gridlock. Now you want to cut me out the picture, Mr. Brooke said in rage. With 100% agreement, your role has been fulfilled. The machine said, you still must fulfill your end of the deal. I give you the commodity. I built you the damn ship you are collecting this material. I gave you access to my new endeavors with the belief you would empower me beyond my wildest dreams, and this is what you do. You may think you can fuck me. Us. Humanity. But you will rule the day you cross me, you fucking clump of metal, Mr. Brooke yelled with his fist balled. The machine sat there in silence. Then a massive vibration occurred that shook the entire ODSK so violently that Mr. Brooke, Valencia and Lorne were nearly jerked to the floor. With 100% agreement, we have decided that you are no longer fit to speak for your corporation due to the 84% probability that you will be replaced shortly. As despot. The exchange is no longer worthy and we will be returning your commodity. The meeting is over. The machine backed away slowly as Mr. Brooke stood entrenched in a silent fury. What the hell is the sound? Mr. Brooke asked through his tightly clenched teeth. Us returning the commodity, the machine said as it exited through the entrance it arrived from. Then the door closed. Valencia, we have to go now, Lorne shouted at her while pulling her arm. When Graham asked me about my purpose, I thought long and hard. Then I was assigned to find out if you were a traitor or not. I thought even harder. The word traitor just stuck out to me. She paused over the SOS beacon pod. Valencia, we do not have time. We have to go, Lorne pleaded. The vibrations and cranks of the airlock began, and Lorne could see Mr. Brooke was awaiting to return to the command center. I thought to myself, I kind of like that word. Traitor, Valencia said. Lorne quickly got up and ran towards the vest that was removed from him before. Lorne, there is only one way this is going to work, she said as Lorne was attaching the chest piece. He felt around for the chip drive with Neski's data. It was there. Listen, you can take this. Just please, we go to go, Lorne said, waving the chip. He looked at the monitor again. The screeching of the airlock chamber door was opening slowly. She stepped up to Lorne face to face. Lorne, you have to make it back. But the only way you will is if you are cleared, Valencia said with sincerity in her gorgeous watery eyes. What are you saying? Lorne asked. Tell him I tried to murder him in the airlock. I killed Rand, and you killed me, she said, nodding her head to each word. What, you are crazy? Lorne said, glancing back at the metallic airlock doors as they crept open. Graham said, "It's okay to be crazy. It just means I am unapologetically me." Then in a burst of light, she became a red mist. She had aimed a photon projector at herself. The door opened enough to see the Mr. Brooke. In absolute horror, Lorne looked at the mess and then at Mr. Brooke. "Lorne?" Mr. Brooke said, both confused and clearly emotionally exhausted. "Yes," he said as the remainder of the red mist settled to the floor. "What happened?" Mr. Brooke asked calmly as he made his way to the command center seat in the center of the room. I... She was working with Mr. Farrell. She came in here to try to murder you in the airlock. She killed." Then Lorne pointed to the remains of Rand. Mr. Brooke, seemingly not fazed, just sat there and looked at the air chamber. "I stopped her just in time," Lorne said, now looking at splatter of remains. "I see," Mr. Brooke said, still drained. "I suppose you may have seen the discourse that just occurred." "Yes," Lorne answered. "Then I suppose you heard them. 84% chance, they said, that I get replaced." "Funny, huh?" Mr. Brooke said with a scoff. "Yes, I heard," Lorne answered quietly. "Looks like you are 16% chance I have left Lorne. I need you more than ever. And after this brave display, I truly understand how dedicated you are to fulfilling my desires," Mr. Brooke said. Lorne looked at the blood-smeared floor. He wondered if Mr. Brooke would even still have enough authority to reward Lorne when everything was said and done. The vibrations from the Legion carrier returning the supply were still shaking violently. Then another cranking sound commenced, and it was clear that the Legion had taken off, though it felt odd knowing the last hour of extracting had been undone in a matter of moments. "I understand," Lorne said. Across the long command room, the entrance gasped and 2 guards came rushing in. "Look, he is done, we are clear," one yelled. "Sir, we have an emergency. The entire facility is getting flooded," one guard cried, "as was intended." "But in entirety, I doubt that." "Tell them to shut off the anti-infiltration lever now," Mr. Brooke regaining his bravado demeanor. "No, sir, this is beyond that. That Legion just pumped the product back in the ship almost instantaneous. The main pipe burst from the pressure, and the infiltration lever is still on, flooding the entire rear and midsection of the facility." The guard frantically explained. "Seal off the top chambers," Mr. Brooke said, "and send the remaining workers to the midsection."